Good morning to you, my friends, wherever you may be in the world today. Alan Clements here from Ubud, Bali, June 13th, 2022. You'll have to excuse me on the different times that I'm beginning. I'm trying to navigate the influx of international visitors at this very public location here in Ubud. In my bungalow complex. And so I'm going to probably begin tomorrow an hour earlier, so it's 7 a.m. Here in Ubud. But besides that, the topic today, again, extemporaneously, thinking about the last 3 years, the porno, the radical fecklessness of leadership, world leadership, to put it mildly, the irresponsibility of institutions, hallowed institutions, supposedly, of corporations, of the social media companies, obviously the banking system, the financial institutions, the medical institutions, the pharmaceutical institutions, you know, the innate derogatory statement of the medical industrial complex, the weapons, industrial, military complex, the pharmaceutical industrial complex, the industry of elitism, authoritarianism, totalitarianism, dictatorship, and the collapse of any semblance of nobility, much less character, value-driven leadership, the utter failure of world leadership, as I see it, in this last 3 years. There have been exceptions, very few. And yes, there are outrages, but the greatest outrage is the unthinkable absence of dignity, conscience, discernment, compassion, loving kindness, generosity, caring by leaders. And the running dogs who have supported, who continually support these leaderless faux leaders in positions of power. It's a rant. And I'm going to address this in my upcoming film, Raw War, head on, not just with satire, comedy, lacerating, hopefully wit, if I can rise to the occasion, but redemptive comedy, such that the genome of the Xi Jinping, the Biden, the Trudeau, the other world leaders, the United Nations, that the genome of fecklessness, arrogance, narcissism, the psychopathology inherent in the men, the patriarchy, there are women too, in violating, desecrating, discriminating, raping, violating life. That level of fecklessness, of unthinkable irresponsibility to the values of decency and what I would call leadership intelligence. Obviously, we have emotional intelligence, we have spiritual intelligence, we have mindful intelligence, we have biological intelligence. We thought that we had medical intelligence, we thought that we had psychological intelligence. We are in the absolute Neanderthal phase of the absence of leadership intelligence. I mean, for God's sake, you need a driver's license. You have to pass a test to get a driver's license, a pilot's license, the responsibility of flying an aircraft with human life in it. World leadership, flying a planet through eternity. You can be there through lies and manipulation and mafia-like violent behaviors. To state the obvious, the place where we need governance and loyalty to qualities of consciousness, decency, dignity, caring, compassion, a world leadership seemingly devoid of compassion, to the point where most of the world's population that reads and sees and hears has zero faith, minus 50 faith in leaders. Maybe the ones whom should be leading have been so violated, desecrated through the manipulative propaganda and the disinformation of the global media. You see people like a Aung San Suu Kyi, who I know very well, and many of the other leaders in Burma, who are completely imprisoned right now. And world leaders do absolutely nothing to support these other sister and fellow world leaders from being released from these dungeons in Myanmar. But setting that aside, or putting that into some perspective. So I'm thinking, where are their leaders? And who knows? We need a new generation of the damn things. There's no doubt about that. But really to the point here is assuming a more intimate role in our own evolutional leadership within our own tribe, community, family, wherever we find influence within the ecosystem of kinship. And I'll conclude here in the second half of this sharing. I'm thinking, like, where is leadership inside? How do you develop it? What is the evolution and the shaping of character or value-driven character? It means defining the nature of character. What are values? What are the concomitants or the mind states inherent in noble, dignified, leadership-driven values? And to become leadership literate of these developmental states of mind as a necessity to assume roles of power. We need to have curriculums that develop leaders, not a Klaus Schwab global elitist young leadership development program to evolve the innate narcissism in consciousness and domination metaphors and behaviors, and the accumulation of power and loot and money as primacy of purpose. That is not leadership, Mr. Schwab, Mr. Gates, Mr. Fauci, Mr. Biden, Mr. Xi Jinping, all the other leaders in the world, in the EU, in Asia, in Australia. The complete desecration of the meaning of the archetypal feminine, the archetypal mother. As a world leadership body, it looks to me like we're in a slow motion, semi-disguised, collective serial killing behavior of life, of fellow citizens, of the animals, the trees, the oceans, the earth, the sustainability of the planet. We call it the Anthropocene. We call it the human-driven desecration of life that's leading life towards the extinction event. Many people call it the irreversibility of the extinction event. And it's driven primarily in this anthropocentric moment by states of consciousness, primarily driven in the minds of toxic patriarchy and essentially the male. And I'm stating things that are so obvious but so dramatically overlooked. And in my own humble way here, wanting to address them as much as I can with the point of the spear. And again, coming back to the film that I'm in development here, I'm going to start shooting it. I'm not sure whether it's going to be in Vancouver or in Maui, other places, come August, September, October, November. But if I'm breathing, I'm determined to make this film to bring out the weaponization of consciousness in art and theater and music to create a kind of existential mind bomb within the individual and the collective psyche of the toxic patriarchal genome on consciousness, in consciousness. And it's my way of engaging in unrestricted war. And it's called raw war. But let me here conclude with a positive note. I'm thinking of, yes, like in the Rahula Sutta at the time of the Buddha, apparently, talking to his son. His son's name was Rahula, according to the text. And Rahula comes to his father, who's a renunciate, a monk, and is speaking as a young man, a teenager, that he would like his inheritance to carry on with his young adulthood in society and not participate in the monastic order or be a renunciate. And so he, in his own humble, probably pure way, is asking his father, would you please give me and grant me that which is due me, the loot, the money, the crypto, the stock options, that which preceded Google and Facebook and Apple. Will you give me a little bit of those shares so I can live my life happily? I don't want to just shave my head and be celibate and to watch consciousness for the rest of my life. And so Dad, Buddha, Lord Buddha, tells his son, I'll give you your inheritance. Listen up, son. And he says, use your mind like a mirror. And okay, I'm going to use my mind like a mirror. A mirror has that ability to reflect reality rightly. And you can look at the mirror wrongly and assume and interpret what you see to be something that isn't actually there, but you see it in the way that you see it. And I think part of the delusion refraction is that you see whatever you want to see through the lens of delusion, and you make wrong right through that filter. And so the Buddha here is saying, listen, look at the mirror straight on, see what it really is for what it is. Truth as truth. Big topic. Now, only if President Biden, Xi Jinping, others would use their mind as a mirror rather than a projection screen of their own delusion and their own impotence their fecklessness. And through that narcissistic filter, denigrate the world for the profit of their own demise. And so, okay, Rahula's paying attention to Dad. And you could imagine if it's experiential and you're on a kind of a moderately or a high dose of psilocybin or the other forms of psychedelic, or you've got an infusion of ecstatic love going right through your vein, a little bit like the ketamine. And all of a sudden, your mind is now so magnified, so luminous, so made manifest, right? And all of a sudden, you're dropped dead in your tracks, and your mind is illuminated with clarity. The mirror now has become so radically inclusive of a trans-holographic, intimate awareness of self, looking at self and all of its distortions and flaws and foibles. And all of a sudden, you're seeing things that you never saw before about your own nature, the mirror, okay? Hyper mirror. And this is why I like the psychedelic, because it illuminates, and this is why I like meditation-infused psychedelic moments, and nature, and light, and intimacy in the feminine, and eroticism, and poetry, and honesty, and consent, and all the various great words of intimacy. And all of a sudden, you're in the mirror moment where you're being encouraged by a savant, a mentor, a shamanist, goddess. Someone's holding space with you, Mr. Biden, Mr. Xi Jinping, and saying, hey, listen, call off the war on evil and use your mind like a holographic, psychedelic, mindful mirror and intelligently look at your own inner beingness through that intimate truthfulness. Pretty rad, right? I wish we had a drug for that. Maybe it's called Dharma. Maybe it's called psychedelic Dharma. The divine feminine psychedelic Dharma. Maybe that's the real meaning of sex or intimacy. I don't know. And so the dad talking to Rahul and said, when you are thinking, son, and I'll kind of hasten along here, and when you are speaking, son, and when you are acting, son, thinking, speaking, and acting. These are the three main avenues of beingness through the senses. Of course, there's a psychic river as well, and perhaps a substratum called the hyper deeper dimensions of beingness in which all things come forth. But to stay in the dimensionality of thought, speech, and action, these are the currents that information comes through us, and either we discern rightly or we discern wrongly. And the Buddha is telling his son Rahula, when you think and when you speak and when you act, use your psychedelically infused, intimate, feminine goddess divinity, mindful, intelligent leadership filter, holographic, trans-awakening intimacy. See it for what it really is, Rahula. And when you're thinking, speaking, and acting from a place that's denigrating, what is the meaning of denigration? It means that you're acting from fear, greed, shame, anxiety, anger, ignorance, patriarchy, violence, toxicity, projection, the ways in which you diminish yourself by diminishing someone else. When you're acting from those concomitants of consciousness, and it requires a radically intimate lens to see some of these states, right? To state the obvious. Leadership training, the study of states of consciousness intimately through the lens. I keep looping back to the lens of the intimate, the goddess, the divinity, the feminine, the psychedelic, the mindful, the intelligence, the intimate intelligence, the intimate, vulnerable, honest, truthful intelligence to feel through your feminine, psychedelicized, mindful intelligence, to see the fucking truth, Mr. Biden, Mr. Trudeau, of what you're actually doing, not your fucking narcissistic projection. Someone's got to get in your fucking grill, dude. Your wife's not doing it. Your friends aren't doing it. The world's not doing it. The corporate media's not doing it. Someone's got to do it. We've got to assume leadership if we hope to have a planet for our fucking children. And so the Buddha's talking to his son, Rahula, Rahula, snap out of the trance of your own fucking delusion, dude. I'm offering leadership training to you, son. You want to grow in loyalty to values and qualities? You want to be respected by the few in this world? Do you want to actually live a life of decency? These old-fashioned words. Decency. Doing well by the way you would like to be loved and held and touched and felt. Doing that with others, with that, of course, radical necessity of consent, Mr. Biden. If you're going to kill someone, why don't you ask their consent? Hey, over there in Yemen, do you guys mind if I supply your overlords in Saudi Arabia with high-tech drones and weapons to kill you? I mean, what about global consent for leaders? How come these things are so kind of farcical and satirical to say from a long distance, but they're just never talked about on the floors of Congress or the Senate or the Oval Office or on the United Nations floor? Where is the radical out there anymore? We're losing our voice. The whole world needs to take a moment and be seeped. You know, they brought psychedelics to Davos. What does that mean? It should be in our drinking water. It should be over the counter in Long's drugs. Medium dose, high dose, small doses. Why is this so radical? It's not radical anymore. Global leaders are talking about dosing. For what reason? Let them make money on their own awakening, but give it to them now so that they can taste the fruits of what the Buddha did to his son 2,600 years ago. Son, snap out of the trance of narcissism. This is a way to protect yourself. Be mindful. Be so empowered in your truthfulness that you quiver when you feel the toxicity of false certainty running through your fucking head, dude. You've got to interrupt the flow, Rahula. You got to learn to have courage. So when you think, when you speak, and when you act, have the courage when it's denigrating to you and others to stop it. Just cease it on the spot, Rahula. Just listen. Listen, Rahula, just stop. S-T-O-P. Learn the elegance of how to stop the flow of primordial smut called greed, anger, and delusion. Lobha, dosa, moha in Buddhist psychology. How to stop the smut in consciousness. Why is that so radical? I'll be repeating these things in my film. Be sure of it. And then he went on to say, Rahula, when you have concluded a thought, this is so cool. When you've concluded a thought, when you've concluded speech, when you've concluded action, and you use your mind like a holographic psychedelic, mindfully, divinely, feminine, honest, courageous reflection on what you just did, son, and you see truthfully that it was not right, not suitable, not beneficial for the person that you did it for, supposedly, Mr. Biden, Mr. Trudeau. Let's ask the Iraqis how well they liked being occupied for 10 years on a lie. And the $7 trillion of our money that was spent to violate, desecrate in the primordial global flow of absence of global leadership, Mr. Biden, Mr. Bush, Mr. Trudeau, all you other guys. And the Buddha's telling his son, when you think and act on an individual or a global level and you spend $7 trillion of leadership bucks, You've got to see, after the war and you pull out of Afghanistan and you leave the people alone to be raped and violated with all of our loot and our money, was that smart? Nope, I don't think so. I think that was so fucking dumb that we should never, ever elect and allow an American, European, Australian, Canadian leader ever to go to yet another forever war in the name of a toxic, narcissistic, patriarchal, idiot behavior. The Buddha gave a teaching long ago to his son. Use your mind like a mirror. Reflect on the efficacy of what you think, do, and say. And then the last category, for those who are really quick-witted, son, before you think, and you can feel the impulsion, before you speak, and you feel the motivation, and before you act, and you feel that chaitana, they call it in Buddhist psychology, that deep urge of the soul to do something, another line of coke, another inhalation of fucking toxic, killing nicotine, another denigrating stock option in a weapons industry, in a pharmaceutical industry, in another theft of the planet's future of life because of your greedy need, Rahula. When you study the intentionality of consciousness, that very deep impulse before the orgasm of toxicity or the orgasm of beauty, because it could be just the reverse. If what you're about to say, Rahula, is beneficial, rock on, son. Do it and do it again and again and say it again and think it again. Make the world a brighter place with your luminous, deep leadership intelligence of creating the sacred and beautiful in this world. But when you feel the impulse to be wrong, have the moral courage, the spiritual courage, the intelligence to cease and desist on the spot. We have a teaching, simple as it may be, and it's just my humble way to state the obvious of, I want to create a sacred garden. Call me a dreamer. Call me a kind of late blooming poet, a theatrical maverick, a humble, dying, former Buddhist monk, whatever. But use our consciousness and the lens of beauty and the lens of moral courage, ethical stamina, rooted in deep, dignified identity and conscience and loyalty to the values. Why is that so foreign to people in leadership? Loyalty to values. It's not enough that you think that you're doing right. It has to be true and good and beautiful for the betterment of the people that you serve. I want to go to Syria. I want to go to Ukraine. I want to go to Afghanistan. I want to go to Iraq. I want to go to the downtown east side where I spent years, in Vancouver, where my daughter grew up. I want to go to every ghetto in the world. I want to ask the people, what is it like for you, for us to live the way that we live in denial of your existence? How is it for you, young son in Yemen and Syria, Iraq and Afghanistan and America and Canada? How is it for you to have no parents and no arms and no legs? How is it for you to have been raped by the Taliban? How is it for you to live in the trauma of this incredible evil that I'm colluding with in this leadership, of a leadership United Nations? How is it for you, Daw Aung San Suu, to be alone in a prison cell with 13,000 other prisoners of conscience, to be thrown under the bus by world leaders and forgotten in the fecklessness of their own narcissism? How is it? Let's ask those people, how is it for them to live in our denial, our ignorance? Anyway, from my heart to yours, thank you for tuning in. And I'm going to keep shifting here with times in the morning in order to find the best time, to find the best quietude, in order to feel the best to deliver these crazy rants. From my heart to yours, have a beautiful day. And I hope to see you tomorrow, God willing. Thank you.